Our scripture today, which Edie read, has a parallel in Matthew. Maybe you've heard before of the Sermon on the Mount. That is what this collection of sayings is. And in Matthew, that takes place on a mountain. But maybe you noticed in the introduction that Edie provided, today's reading takes place on a plain. A wide open, flat, level space. So our purpose is trying to imagine the differences between these two gospel accounts. I think we can think of Matthew's Sermon on the Mountain as a special boardroom meeting on the 34th floor. Closed. Only the disciples and the select few council members can attend that one. But today's sermon, the Sermon on the Plain, is a sermon in the narthex, or a sermon in a lobby. Everybody's invited. We all get to be there to listen to this. I bet people were excited to have this level of access to Jesus. He was something of a celebrity. Luke tells us that everybody was coming to Jesus to be touched by him. If only I could touch the hem of his robe, I would be healed. But once Jesus starts speaking today, his words are what we have to be healed. We don't get to touch him today. When I was in college, I studied abroad, and near the end of my study abroad trip, I went to Rome with a few friends. And the college I went to, for fun, we'd go to worship services. So with my friends and I in Rome, went to go see the Pope, when in Rome after all. And we went to some service or gathering, and it was us and a few thousand other people. And whatever we were doing was done, the Pope walked through the halls, and everybody reached out to try and touch him. And my friend, a tall Scandinavian from Iowa, who identified as Lutheran, but I think wanted to be Catholic, he lurched forward to touch the Pope, and he touched him. And afterward he said, "I'm never going to wash my hands." I would have preferred to hear a sermon. We get a sermon today from Jesus. We don't get to touch him. And we all get to listen to what he's saying, and what he's saying applies to each of us, because he's talking to people who are weeping. Life is hard for every one of us. If you get married or fall in love, either you'll get divorced or you'll be a widow. It's hard either way. If you ever have children, what a blessing, what a gift. You won't know what you're doing, and you'll do your very best, and hopefully your children get old, and you get old with them, and hopefully one day your children lay you to rest. That's how it should go, and that will be hard for your kids, but if the order is reversed, that's even worse. Or you live and you join a community. You make new friends. You join our church. And if you join our church, friends that you make will die. You will receive many, many, many funeral invitations. And it's heartbreaking. It's hard. It's hard. It's so hard. I'm so sorry. How are you doing? I can't imagine. These short little 2 or 3 or 4 word phrases are pretty good counseling for someone who is grieving. I learned this in school. Pastors tend to be do-gooders and fixers, and they do too much talking and explaining. So in school, we learn not to try to solve people's problems, but just to be a non-anxious presence in their life, to provide some stability in the midst of life's storms. So I think Pastors are pretty good at this. Oh, that's hard. That's hard. I'm so sorry. How are you doing? Other people are good at this too, though. I hear people say this. I read it in texts. Personally, when I'm with someone who's sad, I'm afraid to say anything more than this. These days, optimism is in poor taste. Have you seen the world out there? How bad things are? So this morning, Jesus is preaching to all of us on the plain. He's preaching to people who are weeping. But then he looks up at us and says, "You are blessed when the tears flow freely, because joy comes in the morning. You will all laugh." Now, I know people have their problems with church. I hear about them all the time. There's certain dogmas. I can't go to church because I don't believe this, or this. Or people have gone through awful things. How can an all-loving, all-powerful God, who is the giver of every good thing, allow this to happen? Does God give us bad things too? Or sometimes people maybe just quit coming to church because church has gotten too boring. We never actually play with fire in here. It all just seems like kids' stuff. When I was a child, I thought like a child, and I'm not a child anymore, so I'm not going to church anymore. I'll go on Christmas, though. I like Silent Night. When we sing that at the end, I know the service is over. So there's a lot of good reasons not to go to church. And this morning, Jesus gives us one more good reason not to go to church. He looks at all of us in our grief and our weeping, and he says, "You will laugh." It is the rudest thing to say. Here I am heartbroken and mourning, and Jesus has the audacity to challenge my feelings. "You will laugh," he says. Now, as far as impossible doctrines of belief go, I think this is at the top. Christianity says that subsequent to life's lowest moments, when you are in the pit, in the middle of a night that seems never ending, Christianity says, keep going because joy will come in the morning. You will laugh. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, in the beginning of the springtime, when the buds were first appearing on the trees, a grieving woman went to the cemetery to see the grave site of her beloved. She could not sleep. She brought with her flowers, candles, perhaps. And when she went to the place where he was laid, she saw that his body was not there anymore. Nearby, she saw an employee of the cemetery. Must have been the gardener. And she cried to him, "Where is he? What have you done with him?" And the gardener looked at her and said, "Mary." And she sprang forward into his arms. And they wept. And they laughed. Weeping and laughing. This is at the center of our story. It is the Easter proclamation which we share together every Sunday. Even as we laugh, we weep. Even as we weep, we laugh. So you will laugh. All of you will laugh. But you can't force people to laugh. In the midst of life's difficulties, we can't just tickle our way out of them. Knock, knock, jokes and stupid little parties with too much booze won't save us. You will laugh, but we don't know how it will happen. And I think that this is the most delightful thing about our text today. Jesus does not do too much explaining. He simply promises us, you will laugh. If we just keep going, if you can just keep living, not even seeing what is in front of you, you will laugh. I see this even in the midst of death. Part of this job, you meet with families when they're heartbroken and grieving and they've lost someone they love. And you sit with them and you plan a service, but more importantly, you reflect. These are tender moments. They're a blessing, and they're different from the rest of life. There is a calmness, a humility, an honesty present in these moments that the rest of life often lacks. People in these moments will reflect upon the person who has died, and there will be fondness and sadness and incomprehension and frustration and gratitude. And often, almost always, there is laughter. Well, when we were growing up, there were 5 of us, and I remember every summertime we had to drive all the way to Oklahoma to visit Dad's parents. And Mom would sit in the front of the station wagon, and Dad would drive, and it was the 5 of us just climbing over seats and making noise. Oh, it was a long drive. Dad was pretty patient. I remember he'd tell us, hush up. But I mean, we were Dad's kids, so we had vim and vigor too. We didn't listen to him. We'd keep horsing around, pinching, telling jokes, blowing bubbles, hush up. We'd ignore Dad until this 8-foot arm would extend through the back of the station wagon and lock on your little bicep, and you'd know it was time to hush. Mom was so shy, so quiet. Her parents, they were the most conservative, old-fashioned people. Women were supposed to do nothing but the dishes. And I think she internalized that. I don't know what she could have been. She was so shy. But I remember when she thought she was home alone, she'd be doing dishes. She had this Nancy Sinatra album. Dung 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 dung. And she'd turn it on. March around the kitchen dancing while she did her dishes. You're a good dancer. You must have gotten that from Mom. He hated schoolwork. Oh, he hated it. I remember trying to wake him up in the morning. We would play hide and go seek with alarm clocks. I would hide the alarm clocks in his bedroom just so that he would have to get up and find it and get up. He hated schoolwork. I remember it must have been when he was in high school. There was this one time he was taking a test, and he got to the last page, and I'm sure he hadn't studied, and he wanted to be done. And he looked at that last page, and he didn't know a single answer to any of the questions. So he took his test, and he ripped that page right out. He hid it under the desk, and he handed in the test. I don't think the teacher ever even caught him for it. He hated school. Keep going. Keep living. You will laugh.